Now it's time for today's perspective, and today we're focusing on an industry deemed out of control that is threatening biodiversity, also threatening human rights with widespread forced labour and human trafficking. Now they're the issues picked up by my guest today. She spent 9 months investigating the fishing industry in Southeast Asia. Her work documented in her Photojournalist report with the support of the foundation Carmignac. Nicole Tung is winner of the Carmignac Photojournalism Award, and she joins us here on set. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. First of all, we're going to look at your pictures, of course, but tell us of the major issues that they show. First of all, from the environmental, from the biodiversity point of view.
Yeah, so thank you for having me here. From the environmental standpoint, we're just taking too many fish out of the ocean, period. And it's not sustainable. In Southeast Asia specifically, more than 70% of the fish stocks have been depleted over the last 40, 50 years. It's also making things very difficult for local artisanal fishermen because they've lost a lot of their income, or they're having to find different ways to survive now as well. So it's just one of those things where, you know, the biodiversity has been degraded so much. And one of the problems is it's out of public view as well. That's one of the issues that I think makes it easier for people to somehow ignore or accept.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting looking at the scale. Just for example, this picture here of the woman sitting amongst all those fish there. I mean, the scale is quite incredible about what's being taken out of the ocean, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And I think that if it keeps going this way, you know, we're just not able to replenish or allow the fish to kind of replenish itself over a period of time. And I think the greed and industrial scale fishing that is extremely harmful and destructive is part of those problems as well. Bottom trawling is one of them, but also using night fishing, different kinds of nets. All these countries have different issues, and it's just becoming, it's just multiplying by the day.
Yeah, I mean, the demand for fish is exponential, presumably.
Yes, it is. And I think people aren't aware that often half or 3/4 of the catch that is caught in any given ship, for example, ends up being bycatch and is not actually ending up on people's plates. But also there's fish products that are untraceable in this industry as well. For example, a lot of the smaller inedible fish that are caught end up being ground into fish meal that's used in products like pet food and also feed for aquaculture. So it goes into everything. We're also not always able to know where it comes from, who caught it, and that, of course, leads on to the issue of labor rights and forced labor on these industrial ships.
Yeah, it's not just having an effect on the fish population, it's also having a terrible effect on the human population too.
Yes, indeed. And in Indonesia, for example, I spoke to a few fishermen who have been exploited out of their desperation, really, because they come from very poor backgrounds, communities that are often impoverished, and agencies, mainly Chinese agencies, can go and lure them into these kinds of jobs, to take these jobs that are either placing these men into debt bondage or essentially slavery on these ships. They receive substandard food. Sometimes, or often, the drinking water they get is only filtered seawater, not fresh water. They have to buy the food that they're catching to feed themselves. They're at sea for anywhere between 2, 3, 4 months, sometimes 2 years without stepping onto shore. So also the isolation is really impacting on these fishermen as well. They're not able to get home. They don't know if they've been paid. Often the contracts that they have don't guarantee a sum of insurance in the event there's an accident or a death, and their families are kind of left in a lurch.
Well, the pictures obviously are very impressive, but I mean, how difficult was it to get them? Because presumably there was a lot of suspicion as to what you were doing.
Yeah. For the most part, I've faced a lot of challenges in actually trying to get onto ships, to get out to sea, to actually witness what was going on with the labor practices on board. It's been done before, but it takes many, many months to years to actually establish those contacts and the trust. So primarily what I did was I looked into the communities in 3 countries, Thailand, the Philippines, and Indonesia, and looked at it from the different issues where they all kind of meet at this crossroads. So, for example, in Thailand, this picture came from a Koh Lipe, where the indigenous Urak Lowoi tribe have had to kind of redirect their livelihoods towards tourism because there's hardly any fish to catch left in their waters. A lot of that has been exploited by commercial fishing. In Indonesia, where this image was taken, I looked at the labor practices, but also shark fishing, where they used to be able to fish a lot of sharks from their own waters, but now have to kind of go closer and closer to Australia, sometimes illegally into Australian waters. Also, shark fishing is just unsustainable for the species that they're catching. It's pushing a lot of these species that are apex predators into being threatened or endangered. And then finally, in the Philippines, I looked at the geopolitical issues, where China is I think responsible for something like 50% of the world's fishing fleets, 17,000 of which are long-distance fishing vessels. They catch an enormous amount of fish, but also are encroaching onto Filipino fishing grounds, traditional Filipino fishing grounds, but building as well these kinds of outposts on these tiny little rocks and islands to establish their presence there for shipping lanes and for fishing purposes as well.
Very different project for you, this, wasn't it? Because you're quite often in war zones rather than doing this. What were the big differences for you?
Definitely. I think for me the differences were that you really had to kind of think of how to bring a project like this together from so many different places, so many different issues, to try and make it make sense. In conflict zones, often I'm covering the news there or doing feature stories related to the war itself. For example, in Ukraine, I was focusing sometimes on women in the army or something. Whereas it's a very complicated issue that spans a very vast area. So I tried to choose specific places and kind of things that would speak to the overall subject.
Well, look, the important thing is pictures are incredible. It's good to have the issue raised, of course. And next time, when you're doing another project, do get in touch, because I'm sure we would love to see your photos once again. Thanks very much for coming in and talking to us. Nicole Tung, winner of the Carmignac Photojournalism Award. Thanks.